Danny Brown was arrested by U.S. Marshals at an apartment complex in Dallas, Texas. Brown is accused of going to his estranged wife's house on March 27th, where he shot and killed her. Marshals tracked Brown to a Dallas apartment over the weekend.
When they got there, Brown attempted to jump off the balcony, but then saw more officers and law enforcement on the ground. A short time later, he surrendered to police. He'll now be extradited back here to
She was shot
Arkansas.
twice by hitmen inside her mother's apartment, a murder-for-hire plot masterminded by her ex. She survived. 2 weeks later, she married the man who ordered the hit. And 10 years after that, he murdered her himself. This is the story of Edwina Martin, a mother, a mentor, a survivor, and ultimately, a victim of one of the most disturbing cases of domestic violence in recent American history. Her journey is not just chilling, it's bewildering. And sadly, it's not as uncommon as it should be. What drives a woman to marry the man who tried to kill her? Why did the justice system allow that man to walk free? And how did it all come full circle, with the same man fatally pulling the trigger a decade later? You're watching Crime Scene Exposed, where we break down the most twisted real-life crime stories to understand how they happened and how they could have been stopped. If you're passionate about exposing the truth and honoring victims, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss a case. Have you ever seen a case this twisted in your city? Drop your state or country in the comments. We cover crimes from all over. The story you're about to hear isn't fiction. Every detail comes from real events, official records, and verifiable accounts. It begins with a woman who refused to die, but was failed at every turn by the system that was supposed to protect her. And it ends with a haunting question. What would have happened if anyone, had intervened sooner? This is the tragic story of Edwina Martin. Before the headlines, before the horror, before she became the face of one of Little Rock's most tragic crimes, Edwina Martin was a daughter, a mother, and a woman defined by quiet strength and deep compassion. Born and raised in Little Rock, Arkansas, Edwina's early life was marked by the values she would carry with her to the very end: resilience, family devotion, and a fierce sense of responsibility. Her roots ran deep in the community, a tight-knit neighborhood where families knew each other, where church was a central pillar, and where children were raised by more than just their parents. That upbringing shaped Edwina into someone others could count on. Friends and relatives described her as someone who never gave up, no matter what life threw at her. She wasn't loud or flashy. She didn't draw attention to herself. But if you needed her, she was there. Whether it was watching someone's child, offering words of encouragement, or simply showing up when it mattered, Edwina was present. Dependable. Grounded. Her greatest pride, without question, was her children. She built her life around them, navigating hardships, rebuilding after setbacks, and doing everything she could to shield them from chaos. She worked hard to give them stability, even when life behind closed doors was anything but. Her commitment to her kids wasn't performative. It was her purpose. She was also a woman of faith. Her belief in second chances, in grace, and in forgiveness ran deep. Those who knew her say that Edwina tried to see the good in people, even when they didn't deserve it. It's what made her admirable and ultimately vulnerable. She wanted healing more than revenge. She wanted her family whole, even if it meant carrying the burden herself. Her ties to her community were strong and personal. Neighbors, co-workers, and even former classmates remembered her as kind-hearted and dependable. If there was a local event or a fundraiser for someone in need, Edwina would be there. Not because she was trying to be seen, but because she truly cared. But Edwina's story wasn't one of perfect peace. Behind the warmth and dedication was a woman who had endured more than most could imagine. Years of emotional turmoil, physical abuse, and public betrayals had tested her limits. And yet, she didn't let it define her. She survived an assassination attempt. She tried to move forward. She kept showing up for her kids, for her community, for herself. That inner strength, the quiet, determined kind, is what made Edwina so unforgettable to those who knew her. She didn't always have the support she needed, but she gave everything she had. She didn't always make choices others understood, but she made them with the hope of keeping her family together. It's easy to look at the final chapters of Edwina's life and define her by tragedy. But that would be a mistake. Because long before she became a true crime case, Edwina Martin was a woman who fought every single day to live a normal life. A woman who believed in redemption. A mother who put her children first. A neighbor who gave without expecting anything in return. A survivor, long before that word would ever be applied to her by headlines or investigators. Her life mattered, Her choices, her struggles, her kindness, they left a mark on those around her. And if the system had honored that humanity with the protection she deserved, her story might have ended very differently.
Thanks for calling Duck Brother Communication, where we don't care if you owe us 3 cents, we will cut your phone off. This Keisha, what's up, pimp? What's up is y'all to cut my doggone phone off, like y'all retarded or stupid down there. Okay, ma'am, calm down, calm down. Ain't no calm down. Listen, I'm here to help you. Then help me. Say it with me, 1, 2, 3. I ain't saying nothing. Oh, I see, we got one of them. What's your name? It ain't in my name, it's in my mama's name. What's your mama name? My mama name is Tamika. Dummy. And I heard that. Your mammy.
By 2012, Edwina Martin was trying to move forward. She had endured years of emotional and physical abuse from Danny Maurice Brown, a man whose grip on her life had long crossed the line from possessive to dangerous. But around that time, a new relationship gave her hope, Daniel Hill. Daniel was younger, kind-hearted, and brought light into Edwina's world. Friends noticed a shift in her. She smiled more. She seemed to be rebuilding her confidence, trying to reclaim some of the peace and independence Danny had chipped away at for years. For the first time in a long while, Edwina had someone who treated her with care. But Danny Brown wasn't letting go. Danny's jealousy quickly boiled over. To him, Edwina wasn't just an ex, she was property. His control hadn't ended with their breakup, and the fact that she was building a new relationship only deepened his obsession. Over the years, police had been called to their home multiple times for domestic disturbances, and now that same volatility was escalating into something far more dangerous. Danny's behavior turned from invasive to outright threatening. He stalked Edwina's movements, questioned her loyalties, and made it clear, both through words and actions, that if he couldn't have her, no one could. But no one could have imagined what he would do next. In January 2012, Danny took a step that horrified even those familiar with his violent tendencies. He orchestrated a murder-for-hire plot, paying 2 men, Gordon and Quinton Jones, to ambush Edwina and her new boyfriend, Daniel Hill. The plan was disturbingly calculated. Danny allegedly instructed the hitmen to kill Daniel and merely wound Edwina. His motive was chillingly clear: eliminate the man he saw as a threat while ensuring Edwina survived, to live with the trauma, and perhaps to come back under his control. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime of passion. It was a premeditated attack, born out of possessiveness, ego, and a need to reassert dominance. Danny wasn't just jealous, he was determined to destroy anything and anyone that gave Edwina the strength to move on without him. And tragically, the plan would unfold exactly as Danny intended. On the night of January 3, 2012, Edwina Martin and her new boyfriend, Daniel Hill, returned to her mother's apartment on Green Mountain Drive in Little Rock, Arkansas. It was supposed to be a quiet evening. Instead, it would become one of the most terrifying moments of Edwina's life, and the end of Daniel's. As the couple stepped inside the apartment, they had no idea they were being watched. Lurking outside in the dark were 2 men, Gordon and Quinton Jones, waiting patiently with guns in hand. They weren't random criminals. They had been hired, and their target wasn't just Daniel Hill. It was Edwina herself. Inside the apartment were Edwina's mother and her 10-year-old nephew. They, too, would become unwilling witnesses to the violence that was about to unfold. The attack was sudden and vicious. As the hitmen forced their way into the home, chaos erupted. Gordon Jones opened fire, shooting Edwina in the chest and hip. As she collapsed in pain, Daniel, without hesitation, fought back. Despite being unarmed, he lunged at Gordon, managing to wrestle him to the ground and grab his weapon. It was a moment of heroism, but it wasn't enough. While Daniel was trying to subdue one gunman, Quinton Jones raised his own weapon and fired. A single shot hit Daniel in the head, killing him instantly. Edwina lay wounded nearby, blood soaking through her clothes, but somehow alive. Emergency services were called. Edwina was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. She survived the shooting, but would never be the same. She had lost her partner, survived an attempted assassination, and had to grapple with a harrowing truth. This wasn't a robbery or a random act of violence. This was a calculated hit. And the person behind it? Her ex-partner, the father of her children, Danny Maurice Brown. In the days that followed, the Little Rock Police Department launched a full investigation. As Edwina recovered, detectives began connecting the dots. Phone records, witness statements, and financial trails all pointed to Danny Brown as the man who had arranged the hit. According to court records and confessions from the gunman, Danny had orchestrated every detail. He allegedly told the hitmen, kill Daniel Hill, wound Edwina, and whatever happens, don't harm the children. That one instruction revealed everything about Danny's mindset. He wanted Edwina to live, not out of mercy, but so she would suffer. So she would be punished for choosing someone else. So she'd know who still controlled her life. And he almost got away with it. Thanks to key testimony and evidence, both Gordon and Quinton Jones were arrested, charged, and eventually convicted for their roles in the attack. They would serve time for murder and attempted murder. But Danny Brown? Despite the overwhelming evidence, despite the phone records, the connections, and the confessions, charges against him were dropped within months. By August 2012, the case against Danny collapsed. Why? Because Edwina, who had initially identified him as the mastermind, married him. Just 2 weeks after surviving his murder-for-hire plot, while still recovering from her gunshot wounds, Edwina legally married Danny Brown. Investigators, prosecutors, and even those closest to her were stunned. Why would a woman marry the man who tried to kill her?
This is your man.
Yes,
Look at the screen.
that's mine. And,
And,
I'm gonna stick beside him.
that's what you're going to settle for.
I'm gonna stick beside him.
Some speculated it was fear. Others suggested trauma bonding, the psychological trap that keeps some victims tethered to their abusers. But the legal implications were just as concerning. In Arkansas, as in many states, a spouse cannot be compelled to testify against their partner. By marrying Danny, Edwina may have inadvertently shielded him from prosecution. It's unclear what motivated her decision. Whether it was manipulation, misplaced loyalty, or a desperate attempt to survive a dangerous situation, the result was the same. The case against Danny Brown lost its most critical witness. And so, despite orchestrating a murder and nearly killing the mother of his children, Danny Brown walked free. For Edwina, it was a devastating twist in a story that already defied belief. She had survived an assassination attempt, lost the man she loved, and watched justice slip through her fingers, all within a matter of months. But even then, the cycle wasn't over. Because Edwina didn't just walk away. She stayed. And for over a decade, she lived in the shadow of a man who had tried to end her life. For the next 10 years after the murder-for-hire attempt, Edwina Martin remained married to Danny Brown, the same man who orchestrated the attack that killed her boyfriend and left her hospitalized with gunshot wounds. To the outside world, they appeared to have moved on. They raised their children, maintained a household, and at times even seemed to live quietly. But behind the surface, Edwina was still in danger, only now it was hidden beneath the appearance of normalcy. Danny Brown didn't need hitmen anymore. He had Edwina within reach, day after day, year after year. Friends and family noted that Edwina's spark had changed. Though she continued to show up for her children and community, those closest to her saw signs of isolation, exhaustion, and fear. There were no more reports of violence that made headlines, but that didn't mean the control had stopped. It had simply evolved from guns and threats to silence and domination. For a decade, Edwina lived with the man who had already tried to end her life. She stayed, for her children, perhaps for survival, but she stayed. And what's more haunting, the red flags didn't go away. They continued to show themselves in subtle ways. People around her knew the history. Authorities knew the past. But nothing changed. The justice system, having failed to convict Danny in 2012, did little to protect her in the years that followed. If someone tried to kill you, could you ever forgive them? Let us know below. For many, that question is unthinkable. But for Edwina, it was her reality. She lived it, every single day, until it happened again. Until the man who once hired others to kill her finished the job himself. And this time, no one could stop him. It was a Monday afternoon in Little Rock, Arkansas, March 27th, 2023. A quiet day for most, but for Edwina Martin, it would be the last day of her life. By now, Edwina had been married to Danny Brown for over a decade. They had built a life that seemed stable on the outside. But beneath the surface, tension had never truly left their relationship. The man she had once survived, a man who had ordered her death and killed her boyfriend, was still by her side. And the years had not softened him. If anything, they had only deepened his control. That afternoon, something triggered a final, fatal argument. What was said behind those closed doors will never be fully known. But what we do know is this: the words turned into violence. And the violence turned deadly. Little Rock police responded to a shooting call at a residence on 4704 Fairley Drive, located in the city's Southwest Division. Inside the home, officers found Edwina Martin suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. She was still alive when first responders arrived, and they worked quickly to transport her to a local hospital. But the damage was already done. Edwina was pronounced dead a short time later. The news spread quickly, especially among those who had watched her survive the first attempt on her life years earlier. For them, this wasn't just tragic. It was chilling. It was the final chapter in a story that had started long ago with a failed hit and ended with the same man pulling the trigger himself. Danny Brown didn't stay to face the consequences. By the time police began searching for him, he was gone. He had fled the state, vanishing across state lines. A warrant was issued for his arrest, and a manhunt began.
Be considered armed and highly dangerous.
On March 27th, around 4 in the afternoon, police say Danny Brown went to his estranged wife's house on Fairley Drive in Little Rock.
The information we have is that Danny Brown entered the house. I guess maybe an argument ensued. He allegedly shot his wife, and she later succumbed to those injuries at a nearby hospital.
It's been over a week since that happened, and police are looking to get Brown behind bars, including the U.S. Marshal's Office, who has been asked to help.
Well, of course, we want to do this as safely as possible. We don't want anyone to get hurt, including Danny Brown. Preferably, we'd rather Danny Brown just turn himself in, do the right thing.
Police have gotten close to arresting him, but they say he's made it clear he will not be taken in quietly.
One of our biggest tips, I guess, came from Danny Brown himself. He actually called the Little Rock Police Department, gave a statement to them, and then made the statement that he would basically either harm himself or harm others if he was ever cornered by, anyone, especially law enforcement.
If you see Danny Brown or know where he is, police ask that you not approach him because he is considered armed and dangerous. You should call the U.S. Marshal's Office instead.
2 days later, authorities tracked Danny to an apartment complex in Dallas, Texas. But even in the end, he tried to run. When U.S. Marshals moved in to arrest him, Danny attempted to escape by jumping off a balcony. It didn't work. He was quickly apprehended at the scene, taken into custody, and held without bond. From there, he was extradited back to Arkansas, where he was charged with capital murder for the death of Edwina Martin. After years of walking free following the 2012 murder-for-hire attempt, he was finally facing justice. But for Edwina's family and loved ones, it was too late. The woman who had once survived the unimaginable had now lost her life to the same threat that had haunted her for over a decade. A cycle of abuse and violence that should have been stopped in 2012 had been allowed to repeat, this time with no second chance. It wasn't just a tragedy. It was a failure by the system, by the courts, and by the structures that are supposed to protect victims of domestic violence. And it left a community grieving, children without a mother, and a legacy silenced by a man who should have never had another opportunity to harm her. This was the final tragedy of Edwina Martin. Edwina Martin was more than the worst thing that ever happened to her. She was a mother, a mentor, a survivor. A woman who fought to live, not just once, but every single day she spent beside the man who first tried to end her life. She raised her children in the shadow of trauma. She tried to move forward, to rebuild, to believe that maybe the danger had passed. But it hadn't. In the end, Edwina's story was reduced to headlines: Little Rock woman killed, domestic violence case, murder suspect extradited. But those headlines don't capture who she really was or the life she lived behind closed doors. They don't capture the fear she must have carried for years. They don't capture the strength it took to survive. And they certainly don't capture the full weight of what's been lost, not just Edwina, but the future she should have had with her children, the safety she was never given, and the justice that came far too late. Her kids are left behind now, not just without a mother, but with a legacy of grief that no child should ever have to carry. Edwina deserved protection, not paperwork, not loopholes, not silence. And that's why her story matters. Because for every Edwina, there are countless others still trapped, still hoping someone will see the danger before it's too late. If you or someone you know is in danger, please don't wait. Call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 800-799-SAFE. And if stories like this matter to you, help us expose them. Like, comment, and subscribe to Crime Scene Exposed. Your support helps us bring these stories into the light where they belong.